Okay, so I'm gonna lead the discussion, just share a few thoughts to start with, but then after that we'll be joined by a panel. The list of panelists will include Kyle Emmerich from Tufts University, Paul Glue from the University of Minnesota. You can maybe show this next slide, please, Lauren. Heather Schofield from Cornell University, Marcus Boschke from McGill University, Gergely Ugieli from University of Houston, and Laurie Beeman from the Northwestern University. So, we have, one in Canada and the rest in the US. They'll be joining within 25, 30 minutes, okay? But so for now, sorry, Lauren, if you can one slide prior. No, sorry, I'm not going in order. One prior with the agenda. So I was just gonna based on what we know are the typical questions that people have, we have a set of slides that tries to go over some of the questions even before you ask them. We kind of anticipated what your questions may be. We'll share our insights on that, and then we'll have a lot of information as well shared with us about the Kabir Banerjee Predoctoral Fellowship. If you don't know what a predoctoral fellowship is, don't worry, you'll actually get to hear about how that may factor into your application in the next couple of minutes. And then we'll have a panel discussion where each panelist are gonna, after they join us, will answer some questions, and then we'll have breakout rooms. So you can actually ask a lot of the questions that you have in the breakout rooms. And joining me on the screen with video is Ram Sundaram, who's going to talk about the fellowship. All right, so let me go straight now to, if you can jump to slide 4, please, Lauren, and start addressing the question of, anticipating your questions, okay? And we're going to start with, okay, what is a PhD in economics in practice? What does it look like? And what is it for? Okay, so the first thing to kind of know and remember is that the aim of this program is to prepare you to be a researcher, okay? That means to conduct primary high-quality research that can be, either published in academic journals or published in reports that inform decision-making by, policymakers in governments or in large organizations. And so many people with a PhD in economics go into, academia that involves research and teaching. But many also go outside of academia into very important positions. There are positions with the World Bank, with the IMF, in the public sector, and many other options as well. Okay, but ultimately, with that degree, what you want to do and you can do very well is research that helps inform decision making. The good news is that it's actually mostly free. Because when you're admitted into a PhD program in the US, you get a stipend. Okay, that stipend essentially covers your cost of living and your tuition, and so you don't have to worry about bringing in your own finances. Now, that stipend doesn't come for free. In exchange for that, you have to teach. So typically, the first 2 years you don't have to teach; you take classes. But after that, from year 3 to 5 or 6. You have to teach. That's what we call in many institutions being a teaching assistant. So you help a professor with their class. You help grade. You can also earn your stipend through research assistantship. Okay, so you don't have to worry about having the finances. It's entirely covered because we consider you already as a member of the research community, a colleague, a peer, and so you are paid for what you do. But obviously, you have to do it. Now, another thing that people often get confused about, and I get a lot of emails from people asking me before even they apply, if I would be willing to advise them, but that's not the way to think about it, because for most North American PhDs, it's quite different from Europe in the sense that you don't have to match with a supervisor beforehand. In fact, you shouldn't try to. You don't even have to start thinking about the topic until the second year. So you don't need to have already a topic, a research idea, and an advisor. Okay, you just apply broadly to many programs. And then after you get in, you start, learning things. And then once you're in a program, and you've taken the first, foundation, the classes, then you're expected to identify a research topic. And based on that, you'll identify, a committee. And another specificity of US programs is that you don't have just one advisor. Typically, you have a committee. You have two, key people, and, two more in total, like about 4 people that you talk to regularly. Okay, so you're not beholden to just one person. Okay. So that's different from the US, and it's also from Europe, and it's also because most people, we don't expect people to come in having already gotten necessarily the foundation courses like macroeconometrics. The first year is very intense. It's a lot of courses getting very into the foundation. And then the second year is when you start doing the field, what you call field courses. So for example, if you want to learn about labor economics or industrial organization, or, what my specialty is development economics. You also have, obviously you have theory, you have macro. So you start specializing in your second year. Okay. And then it's from year 3 onwards that you're actually a researcher in a sense of a thesis writer. Okay. And it used to be that you'd have 3 years to write your dissertation, so year 3, 4, and 5, and then things have been taking longer and longer. So now most people take 4 years to write a dissertation, so 2 years of classes, and then 4 years of dissertation writing. That's 6 years. So the program covers you for 6 years, and typically you have funding for 6 years. It depends. Some universities only give you 5 years, and have to go faster. But that's essentially how it looks like. And the output at the end of the day, what you're expected to have produced so that you can graduate, what you have to defend, in front of your committee, is a collection of 3 research papers. Okay, so you have kind of like a broad introduction that just explains how the 3 papers fit together, but then really it's just like 3 independent research papers. And they do not have to be solo authored, which means that you can have collaborators on them. And it's very common for PhD students to collaborate with each other within a program. In fact, we encourage that. Okay. Also, you can have one of your papers that's, co-authored maybe with a faculty member that you worked with on a project, some with other students. So, that's the output. They are expected to be high quality papers that will ultimately be published. Moving on to the next slide, should you do a PhD in economics? Well, you have to ask yourself, do you have a passion for research? Okay. Now, you also, it's good to have a passion for teaching, because one of the main avenues after a PhD is to go into academia where you have to teach. But in any case, during the PhD, you have to teach as well. So, and in any case, as a researcher, we are like always trying to, we are a student forever. We are always learning from what we do. So you have to have a passion for learning and a passion for, teaching others what you've discovered. Okay, so even if you don't teach in the classroom, your research, once you are in an organization, you have to kind of like teach others how to understand and interpret the research to make the best decisions out of it. Okay. And then obviously, a PhD is a huge investment. You spend, 6 or 7 years of your life investing in and learning this. It's like really a very, very long time. You want to really make a difference in the world with your research if you invest in that. Okay, so that's what you should ask yourself. Do you really have this passion? It can be daunting sometimes. People are like, oh, my idea is not working out. I have to start again. It's like it's a lot of like learning to learn and trials and error. And so you have to always remember why you're in it to keep going. But I personally think it's a wonderful endeavor, and so I hope it's going to be a good fit for you as well. All right, so next slide. So the application process, there are a few things to know that are very, very important. Okay. So, first you have to really plan ahead. Okay, because to start a PhD program in essentially August, usually it starts in August because of a calendar year. we're on an academic year calendar that starts, August or September, but usually PhD students have to arrive on campus in August. So, for example, to start next August 2026, you need to apply by essentially December of this year, by December 1st. Many universities have a deadline on December 1st, maybe some are December 15th, okay? So if you want to start next August, you have to apply in the next couple of months. And that's probably going to be quite tricky if you've not already gotten started on preparing, okay? So most likely, you should think about getting started maybe, in August 2027, which means applying by December 2026, which means that you have essentially a year to get ready. And what does it mean to get ready? Well, one question is, what should you do before the PhD? Maybe you've already graduated from your undergraduate program, maybe you even have a master's, but do you want to go straight into the PhD program, or do you want to first have some experience, especially experience with research? That can be very useful to even know whether you like it, whether that's for you. So one option is what we call a predoctoral fellowship, which is where you kind of work as a research assistant for a professor of economics at a university. You can either come and sit at the university and do like desk research, or you can be based in their research site, we call that field research, and you work there and you communicate with the researcher remotely. But many students do that nowadays, and it's a great way, especially if your degree is not from a US institution or a Canadian institution. People may not be familiar with your degree granting institution. They may not quite know how to read your transcript. And so having had a chance to have essentially connected with a network of US-based or Canadian-based researcher, or even European researchers for that matter, and gotten that experience can help you get a foot in the door, okay? So that's one thing to think about, getting research experience, both to know whether it's for you and to also get into to be, to have that pedigree on your CV. And then another very important thing to think about in the timeline is that there's a requirement that you take a standardized test called the GRE. And the GRE, it's kind of, I've actually never taken it myself because I did my PhD in France. But what I know of it is that it's kind of a test that you can be top-notch in math, you can be a genius in math, and yet get a bad score. Why? Because you don't know how the test works, okay? So that's a standardized test that just requires practicing taking the test, being familiar with the test. And, American applicants are very good at that. So, they practice, and then they get a very good score, even if they actually don't know that much of the background material. So what you need to do is to actually prepare for the GRE. You can't just say, "Oh, I've done a master's in math, so I know everything." No. You have to prepare to be ready to take the test, know how it works. There are even classes that you can take online. They are not cheap, but there are a lot of material nowadays out there that you can find for free. You just have to be very, very familiar with the test, because it's designed in such a way that speed matters. And also, if you get a question wrong at the beginning, I think it sends you on a different track. And so you can't even show how smart you are down the road. So you have to be very, very savvy when you plan to take the GRE. And so our recommendation is that you take it way in advance, like essentially over a year in advance. Because in case you don't get a good score, you can take it again, okay, to improve your score. And it really, really matters because people look at that, and there are so many students who get a perfect score that the score result that's sent directly to the school where you apply. It tells you they tell which percentile you're in, and so if you're not in the 90th percentile, then the schools are going to be like, well, okay, we have many others who are in the 90th percentile, so we're going to focus on those. Okay, so the GRE is very important. And all the more important if you come from an institution that don't commonly send PhD students to the US. So take it way in advance. Try to take it maybe at a test center rather than online. I've heard that it's better in a test center. Now, it's more constraining. You have to go where there's a test center. I know they are, all around the African continent, maybe not in your hometown, so you may need to travel, but it's worth, investing a little bit in that because it really pays off, and do it really early so that you have a chance to take it again, okay? Then the other thing that really matters for the application is how much quantitative courses you have on your transcript. Much more than econ. So we don't expect people necessarily to have been an econ major. You don't need to have studied econ much beforehand, but we would very much want to see that you are able to handle, like math, and that's because economic theory is quite, requires mathematical skills, okay? And so you want to have to take, calculus, linear algebra, real analysis, differential equations, probability and statistics, maybe not all of it, but at least some of it, and you need to demonstrate that you can do well. And so if you have taken these classes and you didn't get a good grade, that's not going to look great. If not taken those classes, that's not going to look great. So you want to have taken those classes and gotten a very good grade, okay? If not, it's really going to be a challenge. And you may want to apply to a discipline that's a little bit less quantitatively oriented and a bit less like theory oriented than economics. Okay. Then research experience can be quite useful. So we already mentioned the pre-doc above. That would be research assistantships, but also your own research. So if you've written an honors thesis, I don't know that many universities have that in your institutions, but an honor thesis in the US system is essentially a thesis that students can write in their fourth year of the bachelor's degree. So 4 years, the fourth year of university, and it's called honors because in most universities, only the students with a high enough GPA are allowed to do that. So you're already like pre-selected on having done well, and then you can write a piece of research for which you have an advisor, and then the quality of that research can already inform quite a bit about your potential as a researcher, and in particular your advisor who help you write this piece can speak to your research ability. Okay, so if you have done something like that, and for outside of the US, this may not be as common, but maybe you've written a thesis as part of your master's, then sharing that information, sharing the PDF of your research itself, and making sure that whomever advised you on that writes you a letter to speak about your research ability is going to be very important. And so that brings me to the letters of recommendation, which are also very, very important. And that's another thing where the standards in the US for how letters of recommendation are written are actually very, very high. So when I write a letter for a student applying for a PhD program, the letter is going to be 2 to 3 pages long, sometimes even more. I'm going to say a lot about, how I know the students, what I know about the students, what I'm qualified to talk about the students. I'm going to talk about, their acumen as a researcher, their work ethics, their abilities. So that's a significant investment for, a writer to write such a letter. I've seen letters from people, who are not from the US, and often they don't necessarily know how intense a letter has to be. So they just say, have one paragraph, yes, this person was in my class and he's nice, you should admit him. Well, that's not going to help. Okay, that's not going to help. It's something that's like much more detailed. And so, having an example actually can be quite useful. So I don't know if J-PAL would be willing to have that. That's just a question for Lauren and Priya to like write down. But I think it would be very helpful to have kind of like an example. I mean, obviously we don't want everybody to just like copy and paste from the example. So that's a tricky part. But at least some guidelines because and something that actually applicants can share with with their potential letter writers. Okay, and then the last thing is that you're going to have personal and research statements that you have to write. So those are quite you can, I'm sure you can find online some suggestions on how to do that. you don't have to, tell necessarily your life story in a personal statement, more like why you want to do a PhD, and what you hope to accomplish with that. And then the research statement can be, you don't have to be too worried about having, a very specific research proposal. Because as I said, you don't need to have that to get going, but you need to have at least something a little bit coherent, but like showing that you know what it means to do research at the PhD level. Okay, so some general topic that you're interested in, and some sense of the methods or the field. It's not binding. Whatever you write in a research statement, you're not going to be asked to do exactly that in the future. But that's that's, you have to show that you have some sense of why you want to do a PhD. Okay. Okay, so I've already talked about the GRE, so I don't know if I need to cover that again. I see a lot of our panelists are joining, so that's a cue for me that I should probably try to wrap up and go a bit faster. A key question that people often have is also where should I apply, and where should I go? So it's very, very competitive when you apply for a PhD program. So you don't want to apply to just one or two places. That would be too risky. What typically people do when they apply for college in the US, but it's the same when you apply to a PhD program, I would say, shoot for the moon with just like 2 or 3 rich schools. These are the schools where, it's going to be very, very hard to get in, but, why not? You deserve to give it a shot. And then maybe 10 schools that are right level schools. So what does it mean? Well, it depends a little bit on, how strong your transcript is, how strong your research experience, how strong your GRE. And then 5 safety schools. This would be schools where, you think like, yeah, you should be able to get in for sure. And then that's where you still have a choice. You have, you're almost guaranteed to get into one school, but then maybe you'll get into more and you can choose. So how to target to know what is the right level. I would say MIT is a rich school for everyone. That's but then that's where you want to calibrate a little bit and write for the right level and safety school, and so try to talk with others that in your network that may have applied in the past to get a sense of what's realistic. And then you don't want to be too picky, so yeah, I mean you can look for faculty who share your interests. Obviously, don't apply to a program where there's absolutely nobody who does what you're interested in. But people move a lot, so you don't want to pick just one professor and say I want to work for that person and that's it. Be open-minded. Also be open-minded about what you want about the fields. You don't have to spend too much time to get a sense for whether there's specific people you want to work with, but just get a sense for whether there's at least like some activity in your broad domain. So for example, if you want to do development economics, you want to go to a place where there's at least 1 or 2 people doing developments. Okay, so I think because time is running, so we should move on to the Kabir Banerjee Fellowship. You can take it away, Ram.
Great. Thank you so much, Pascaline. And thank you to JPAL for inviting us to speak about our program. The Kabir Banerjee program, in short, is basically a pre-doctoral program in which we identify top talent from low and lower middle income countries, as defined by the World Bank. And we connect them to top econ departments and faculty globally. The idea being that by giving them this pre-doc as a bridging program, we're enabling them to apply to and be competitive for top PhD programs after the pre-doc is done. Lauren, could we go to the next slide? Great. So the Kabir Banerjee Fellowship falls under the Development Innovation Lab, which is at the University of Chicago. The lab was set up by Professor Michael Kremer, who together with Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo won the Nobel Prize in 2019 for their work in development economics. Within that, the Kabir Banerjee Predoctoral Fellowship was founded to honor Kabir Banerjee, Abhijit Banerjee's and Esther Duflo's son, who unfortunately passed away. And in his memory, we set up the program to enable other people to realize their dreams. So finding people who want to make an impact in the world and providing some of the resources that can help them do that. How the program works is pretty simple. We identify top candidates through our application cycle. Our application cycle is currently open if anyone is interested in applying. And we identify a short list of candidates who we will send out to a lot of top faculty in our network. Now, the faculty can then make offers to our fellows. If they make offers and our fellows accept those offers, then it becomes official. They start a pre-doctoral position and work closely with one of these faculty members. Previous fellows have worked at UC Berkeley, Duke University, MIT, Northwestern, the Paris School of Economics, London School of Economics, Stanford, University of Chicago, Yale, and that's a sort of moving list. Could we go to the next slide? Great. Now, for this program, we highly emphasize the math skills component of it. In fact, our sort of vision for the program is we don't necessarily need applicants who've had a lot of prior economics experiences. What we're looking for is someone who has really strong math skills. So that could come from a number of degrees like engineering, mathematics, physics, statistics, obviously economics programs as well. But that's not an exhaustive list. If you have a background that's not in one of these departments, but you have strong math talent, we want you to apply. And our reasoning for this, and I think Pascaline touched a little bit upon this as well, is that a lot of top PhD departments are looking for strong math skills, both for the program itself and for the fact that economics research, especially in the development space, increasingly draws upon some of those core math skills. The ability to design and analyze RCTs, working with complex econometric models, sort of coming up with your own models for how you want to conduct research, how you want to weigh data. Math is just becoming increasingly more synonymous with a lot of the work that's being done in the field. So as part of that, we also have GRE expectations. I think at an earlier stage, we'd want to see, if you already have a GRE score, we'd want to see 160 or above. And in the later stages, because we offer people the chance to take the GRE again, we'd like to see scores that are 168 and above. So 168, 169, 170. And I'll mention that we do cover the GRE fees for shortlisted candidates. And so I think this is going to be a common good regardless of how your application does for this particular program, because having a good GRE score allows you to send it to universities and boost your applications, any other applications that you have as well. Could we go to the next slide? So let me talk a little bit about the eligibility and selection process. And I think I will also be in one of the breakout rooms at the end if anyone has questions about this process. So eligibility, first, we're looking for people who've done a high school, bachelor's or master's degree from a lower middle income country, because that is our target audience. And the second, we do look for a working proficiency in English. A lot of the research, like the material that you'll be covering, interacting with, just involves a greater degree of English. Obviously, if you get placed somewhere like the Paris School of Economics, knowledge of French would be very valuable in that context. But regardless, I think it helps to have this proficiency in the language. We look for strong grades. So when I say that, again, because PhD programs also keep an eye out for like how you've done academically, we're looking for people who've received first class honors, distinction, perhaps second class upper honors as well. And I know some of you may follow a similar system in your own degree so far, but an equivalent would be 80% and above on a percentile ranking basis, roughly speaking. We look at how many strong math courses you've taken, and we want to see that you're interested in learning more about economics, even if you don't already have a background in that. It's great if you have prior research experience. Doesn't have to be in economics as long as there has been research experience of some kind. If you know how to code with R, Python, Stata, even at a fundamental level, that's going to be very helpful because, again, that's going to be a pretty strong component in your research careers. And I'll just briefly talk about the process and say that you're welcome to apply to the fellowship. When you apply, if you have a GRE score, feel free to submit it. If you don't, we will walk you through a selection process. And if you're shortlisted, we will pay for you to take the GRE and we'll give you time to prepare for the GRE. There'll be an interview stage. And based on all those different factors, we will create a shortlist and send it out to top faculty members across the world. Could we go to the next slide? So some of the benefits of doing the fellowship, firstly, a pre-doctoral fellowship is basically like a paid research position. You'll receive a salary that's pretty like on par with what you would get for a role like that in the area where you're placed. So depending on where in the US or in Europe you're placed, that exact number will differ, but essentially you don't have to pay to do this fellowship. You will get paid to do the fellowship. You get 2 years of research experience, which will be very valuable on a resume and in terms of your profile when you're applying to a PhD program. And being linked to a top faculty member also means that they will mentor you in terms of figuring out, oh, what additional classes should you take while you're doing this pre-doc? They could help you review your statement of purpose and your research statement. They could write you a letter of recommendation. And all of these things are very valuable and they all stack up when you're applying for top PhD programs. We also provide some additional support in terms of preparing for the GRE, helping you take classes, covering application fees for PhD programs, and just providing support in a number of different ways, which I'd be happy to get into later. So are you next? Please apply now. We would love to hear from you. Our upcoming deadline is November 30, but I will say that we strongly encourage you to apply as soon as you can. If you're ready today, apply today because we review applications on a rolling basis. In terms of what you need to apply, your CV, your academic transcripts, you don't need all your references when you initially submit your application. So you can submit and then work on getting your references in. With the GRE, similarly, if you already have a high score, you're welcome to submit when you submit the application. If you don't have it, don't worry about it. We will work with you and figure out if we need to test you for the GRE down the line. So thank you very much. Please feel free to reach out to this email if you have any questions, and we look forward to hearing from some of you.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So we now have our panelists. I think everybody has joined, so that's wonderful. Thank you. And we have questions first that I'm going to ask the panelists. And so, yeah, I guess we're going to start with Kyle. Thank you, Kyle, for joining us from Tufts. And we'd like to hear from you about what a good motivation letter looks like, what a good personal statement looks like, and what a good research statement looks like. Thank you.
Thanks, Pascaline. So I'll just sort of talk about the personal statement and the research statement, and first say that these things don't need to all look exactly the same. So there's no like template that is out there to follow. So I can't just sort of like give you a recipe and say this is exactly, you know, what your statement should look like, paragraph 1, paragraph 2, paragraph 3, and so on. But keeping that in mind, here are some sort of ideas sort of that I sketched out to try and sort of help you stand out with this statement. The idea is that, you know, all the admissions committees read tons of applications and you want to use this statement to stand out. So how to do that? One is to definitely avoid like long personal stories and personal sort of narratives. A lot of people, tell long personal stories for 5, 6, 7, 8 paragraphs, and then talk about research and their motivation for doing a PhD with one paragraph. And that's a bit of a misfire. You want to avoid those long personal stories. Since it's called a statement of purpose, it's important to use that document to explain, what really motivates you to do a PhD. This could be like a specific career objective. It could be the sort of intellectual curiosity to solve a specific problem, but it's important to, when looking at those, for me, to see somebody who is driven by a goal. The next thing to keep in mind is how to talk about research, and the research that you want to do during your PhD. As I hopped on the call, Pascaline was talking about this a little bit, and she mentioned that you don't need to be super specific with exact research questions that you're going to try and look at in your PhD. No admissions committee is expecting you to say that the title of my job market paper is as follows. That's not what your goal shall be. And it's especially risky because whoever's reading it may not like that as a job market paper. So it's better to, but at the same time, I should say, you don't want to be too vague as well. So you don't want to say, well, we get a lot of students in development economics at Tufts, and you don't want to say, well, I want to study, say, poverty in a specific country. That's a little bit too vague. So you want to be in the middle. And most importantly, like the personal statements that really pop with me, and when they're talking about research, are the ones that the way that the statement is written and the way that it talks about research really conveys to me that you're somebody who understands what high quality academic research is all about, and kind of understands where the frontier and what frontier research is like in the field that you want to work in. Talking about specific things that you'd like to work on is good, but again, you don't need to lay out the exact topics. But if you talk about research in a way that says, oh, this person, has these interesting, ideas on, market power in a specific country, and they talk about industrial organization in a way, even though that's not my field, in a way that sounds, sounds very, very credible. That I think can go a long way. But it's really signaling that like you're understanding where the high quality research sits. The next thing I'll say is that definitely use these documents to signal, to show your ability as a writer. So it's important to produce high quality writing in a PhD program. And so don't take writing quality lightly when producing the personal statement. Write it or rewrite it. Look it over for sentence clarity and conciseness. Get help with that from whatever tools are available to you for writing quality. If those are really well written, I take that as a good signal that you will be able to produce high quality writing when you go to do your dissertation step later on. And then I guess the last thing that I sketched out that I wanted to touch on for these documents is, if you have research experience, whether that research experience is a pre-doc or say an extended RA that you did for somebody, or a master's thesis or an undergraduate thesis, oftentimes that will have been a research experience that sort of motivated you and led you in a certain direction with wanting to do a PhD. So I find it useful when applicants explain, how their past research experience has, sort of led them to applying. So what are the key things about doing research that they learned from that process? Again, to signal that when you get to that point in the PhD, you're going to hit year 3 and hit year 3 sort of running. Okay. So those are really the things that I have. But I'm happy to answer other questions in the breakout room on those documents.
Thank you so much, Kyle. Let's move on to the next set of panelists. We're going to talk now about letters of recommendation. Who should you ask, and what committee is looking for in these letters. So we have Paul and Heather showing thoughts. I don't know who wants to go first, whether you guys have coordinated in advance, but
we didn't coordinate. Heather, do you want to go first, or do you want me to go first?
I'm flexible. If you have a preference, go for it.
Okay, why don't I go ahead since I think I'm ready. Yeah, for these letters of recommendation, what we're looking for, to be honest, is somebody that we actually know or that we at least are acquainted with, so that we kind of trust what they do. There's a problem in some countries, and I'm not saying which ones. I know some Asian countries, the professors will just tell the student, here, you write the letter and I'll sign it, okay? And those turn out to be pretty bad letters. So we're kind of suspicious that is this person actually writing the letter? And the more we know the letter writer, the better. So in the case of, the people here, if you've ever met somebody, maybe somebody was visiting, maybe you even worked for somebody who was coming from a European or American or Canadian university, and they know you and you think they'd be willing to write a letter, definitely ask them. And what we want to know in these letters is kind of, hopefully the person knows you both academically and perhaps some research experience you may have, how you did in that, kind of confirming what your interests are, and maybe, to be honest, even saying some shortcomings that you may have. Lots of these letters that they say, tell us the strong points and the weak points and things like this. So I would start with trying to find somebody who's ideally, a person who is now or has been in a university in the US or Europe or not. If not, somebody who got a degree, their PhD from one of these places, so they kind of know how it works. If you ask somebody to write you a letter and they say, you write the letter and I'll sign it, that's not a good sign. We can usually figure out that's what's going on, because the letters are not very credible. Okay, so I don't know if I scared anybody there or not, but Heather, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure, I have a few things I'd love to add. So I think in my mind, I agree with what Paul was saying, but I also think there's a real trade-off in asking people you don't know well. So the kind of the downside risk of asking someone you've met in passing is that the letter they write is basically, this student is a nice person, like Pascaline was saying, or, this person I met once seemed like they were pleasant, which is really not going to help you either. And so I think what I would recommend is thinking about kind of where is the sweet spot and getting someone whose name is known and has some credibility, but also can speak to you as a person. Because we need kind of some content in the letter that tells us a bit about your ability to do independent research and to thrive in a PhD program. So you want it to be someone who can discuss skills like curiosity, ability to formulate a question, persistence, resourcefulness, these skills that I think are going to be really paramount in your success. And so these letters that are just like, this person got an A in my class, or I've casually met this person, also don't really add much to your application. And so what you want to do is find that kind of combination of people who have some reputation, if possible, but also who really can speak to you as an individual and kind of add something to your packet so that we get some additional signal on things that we care about. And the best way to do that is people who you've worked with, because they can observe those skills in a way that you can't from kind of the transcript or the like. The other thing I think I would add here is ask your letter writers in advance and be organized. I can't tell you how often I get last minute requests to write somebody a letter. And these things are not easy to write. To do it well, it's going to take time, and our lives are busy, and we want to support you, but we also can't turn these things around overnight. So what I would say is sit down and think hard a few months in advance about who you think your letter writers would be ideally, and go out and talk to those people. Ask them, are they comfortable writing you a letter? Have that discussion, and have time, if they say no, that you can go to someone else and still have time to ask them with at least of a month, I would say, of advance notice to write the letter. I guess I would also say on that, one thing that I think also will help you get a better letter is to help your letter writers make this as easy as possible. So for example, send them a recent CV. Maybe make some notes on your interactions and the strengths of the things that you've done, like, you know, successes that you had in a project that you work on together. A lot of these people are going to be working with many, many students, and they have to go back in their mind 3 years to when they met you and think about all the things you did. And I think adding a few notes often in kind of the request for the letter helps them jog their memory and remember all the great things that you contributed to a project, so that they can write that kind of much stronger letter. And then I guess one addition to that is just to be very organized and to help your letter writers be organized too. So one thing I ask of all of my letter people who request a letter of me is essentially that they send me a Google Doc. And that Google Doc has all the places they're going to apply. It has all the deadlines. It has whether the app, like the link, has been sent to me or not. And then we're basically all on the same page, and I check the boxes. I go down and I submit those letters. And then we know whether things are getting in on time. And one thing that will help them get in on time and not miss deadlines is you should send those links at least a week or two in advance, again, so they have time to kind of do all the uploads that are there. All of this comes in a huge wave. It's often hard to see the other side of the process. But for us, if we have a bunch of people who are applying, we're often uploading hundreds of letters, and some people have support and some people don't. And so you need to give people adequate time to do that. It's just very practical, but I think it will help you kind of get more success in getting things in a timely way. I will pause there. Happy to take questions in the breakout room.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul and Heather. And yeah, I want to stress out that point that it's not the case that your letter writer will give you the letter and then you have to upload it with your file. It's a separate system because these letters are confidential. You don't get to see them. Obviously, that's you know, if your letter writer knew you would see the letter, then maybe they would not you know, be as candid. And so it's very important that this confidential aspect, which means that you don't, you know, you need to also trust that your letter writer will actually upload. And so maybe that's another factor, like pick somebody who's, you know, who does respond to, you know, to email. All right, thank you so much. So we'll move on to the next question. We have Lori Beeman, who's going to tell us about you know, academic preparation and what's what matters the most. Go for it, Lori. Thanks.
Great. Thanks, Pascaline. And Heather, I might be following up with you for like a template that I can send to people I'm writing letters for to follow that checklist. So this is the great thing about doing these panels, is that we're also always learning from each other. So what are we looking for in terms of academic preparation? When I look at an application, I'm kind of looking for like 2 buckets of things. Like the first bucket is this applicant going to be able to do well in the coursework component of our PhD program? And then the second part is, do they have the potential to do great research in economics? Academic preparation largely, I think, falls within that kind of first bucket. Are you going to do well in the coursework phase? Ram largely did my job for me. Thanks, Ram, being very detailed even in terms of the types of math background in particular that most econ PhD programs are looking for. I will flag that, like, given what your background is, you really want to lean into it, and you can tailor the types of PhD programs that you're applying to in order to match what your background is. So at Northwestern, we're going to be looking for applicants to have a background in proof-based math, also real analysis in particular, but there are other PhD programs that you can have a great career which are going to have a little bit less stringent of math requirements. So, you know, going back to Pascaline's point about picking a sort of maybe a menu of different types of programs that you're applying to, keep in mind your own academic background and where you want to go in the future when you're picking those schools so that it matches well. So we are looking for a background in math. A couple of things sort of going into the second question, how do I, if I'm reading an application, how do I assess the quality of someone's preparation? I think that's particularly important for this webinar. Some of you might be applying from countries where, you know, at Northwestern, we haven't admitted a ton of students from your country. So we might not be that familiar with how to read your transcripts, et cetera. And there's lots of differences across countries and how the academic program is organized. So a couple of things that I would flag is in the US, students will take standalone math classes. So it's very obvious what their math preparation is. Other programs do mathematics embedded into their economics coursework, or if you were an engineering major, et cetera. So it could be that your math preparation is very strong, but it's less visible on your transcript. In those cases, I would actually recommend that you tell your letter writers. Hopefully you have a letter writer from your home institution, that's the transcript. That letter writer can actually guide me as an admissions committee member and how to interpret the transcript in terms of grades, and also things like, oh yeah, they're doing, you know, they're learning how to do proofs, but it's embedded in this econ class. So that's where you can, you know, as Heather mentioned, you can, you know, sort of give highlights of what, you know, don't write the letter yourself, but you can give highlights of your achievements. You can also ask your letter writer to flag some of these things to help admissions committees understand your transcript better. And I guess the other point I would say in terms of the GRE, I actually do think the GRE is very important these days. I think it's become more important since COVID, and it's even more important for people who are coming from institutions that we're not as familiar with. And so having a strong GRE score can be reassuring for admissions committees to be able to interpret your transcript, that they'll have confidence that your transcript is actually showing very high quality preparation, especially if the grading system is one that we're not as familiar with compared to the US. So the GRE score does not have to be perfect, but I do think a strong GRE score can really be a strength and complementary to the rest of your academic preparation.
All right, great. Thank you so much. So we are reaching the last very important question before we do the breakout. So we have two panelists, Marcus Poschke and JJ Hujehi, who I'm sorry for not pronouncing the names right. You'll correct me. And so here the question is, what are you looking for, you know, as you know, PhD programs in terms of research preparation, and are pre-docs the best way to get research experience? So I don't know who wants to start.
Okay, good. Do you want to start? Otherwise, I can start.
You're listed first, so why don't you start?
Okay, sure. So I think this is a very important question. So I've been thinking a bit about you know, the variety of research experiences that the students have that we get applying to our program at McGill, and it's really quite broad. So, and when I think about like who we accept, for example, like we don't have that many. We have a good mix of students with pre-docs and students with RA experiences. Basically, like RA experiences are very important, and we hardly accept students without that. Pre-docs is a bit less clear, but also like the applicant mix is a bit smaller. So let me talk a little bit about the why. So, and before I get to that, actually, let me just echo what Laurie said, right? So when we're looking for two things, we're looking for academic preparation, and then we're looking for like possible like research skill. And so of course, the first thing that we look at really is the academic preparation, the econ and math courses you took, and how you did in those. And these are really absolutely essential. I won't go further into those because Laurie already talked a lot about that, and that was very helpful. Now, if you sort of pass that bar, right, then we also look at your research experience. And so I think here, this also interacts with the other questions, because I think that maybe almost, let's say you do an RA-ship, right? The main way we're going to hear about that, and the main thing we're going to learn about you from that, is what your letter writers are going to say about you, right? So I think one of the very big benefits from doing an RA experience is that your RA advisor is going to get to get to know you quite well. They're going to learn about your skill. They're going to learn about your personality. They're going to learn about your interest. And this is going to help them write a really informative letter for you that like just a professor that you just see in a class like could not possibly do, right? And so I think in some sense, this is almost the main way in terms of which an RA experience can be useful in an application, right? Your application is going to be so much more informative than if you didn't have this, right? Now, then to a second benefit, of course, about the RA experience is that you're going to learn much more about a certain field, and you might know much better what you want to do in a PhD, and so that's going to help you maybe also write a better motivation letter, like what Kyle talked about initially, right? So I think really quite a few students are working as RAs now, I think, and these experiences make a big differences in the letter, and we really see this in the applications coming in, and we really value that information. Also to connect to what Paul said, like when a person was your RA supervisor, well, they have much more concrete things to talk about. The letter becomes much more credible than just a letter with much less information. To talk a bit about the pre-docs. So here there's a lot of heterogeneity, I think. So it really matters like what you did, where, with who. You could have pre-docs where you do fairly simple things. You could do pre-docs where you do quite advanced things. So I think it's if you did this, I think it's quite important to have somebody like testify to that. And again, that's going to be through the letter. So we're going to learn through the letter what you really did there. A final remark. So it doesn't. So if you did a pre-doc in a if you did a good pre-doc, it doesn't. We put value on that, but nevertheless, we also take into account that often students, as they take courses in the beginning of the program, they're still going to change. That your interests are still going to change, right? So if you're really skilled in like working with microdata, well, that's great for the PhD, but you might also still be doing something else, right? And so this is why we really value a portfolio of things. Okay, so I think I've talked enough. I'm going to pass it on to Gregory here.
Yeah, thanks. So Marcus touched upon a lot of important things. So I'll just add a few bullet points. So I think perhaps the most important aspect of research experience is to have some. So we absolutely want to see what you understand what research is. We want to have some indication of what the research might be that you might do. And so the key to having research experience is, of course, that you need time to develop it. So, applying for a PhD program in January is not something you should decide in September. It's something you should, plan for and prepare for several years. And that's the way to get research experience. The other thing I'll say is, the research experience that's most informative tells us about your thoughts and the topics that you're interested in and the work that you did. So I always find, undergraduate theses or master's thesis very informative, and a lot of these are very impressive compared to some RE experiences, which can be very valuable, but RE experiences where somebody tells you what to do and clean the data or kind of perform low-level tasks tell me a lot less about kind of how creative you are. And just a lot less information about the type of research that you might do. So that's point number 2. Number 3 is, kind of related to that. We want to see that you understand what research is. So, when you submit writing samples, don't submit essays, don't submit, consulting reports unless they have, kind of serious economic analysis in them. Just in general, don't submit papers that are not really economics type papers, because if anything, they'll send the wrong signal. And then the last thing is kind of tying back to things that a lot of people talked about. It's nice when the application package kind of sends a consistent message and has these reference points between the various elements. So if you have research experience, make sure and you submit a paper, make sure you talk about it in your motivation letter. Ideally, your reference letter writers are going to talk about it. Perhaps most importantly, be prepared to talk about it if we do an interview with you and ask you about it. we might ask you about, the paper that you submitted, that should not come as a surprise. So, thinking about what message the application package as a whole sends is I think a very useful part of the preparation. Thanks.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much to all the panelists for these great insights. We now have breakout rooms.